I met Michelle when she was 2 years old and probably 2 feet tall, maybe more. We called her Munchkin, and she was a little pistol right from the start. She lived with her mom, who I was dating at the time, and with her grandparents, Mimi and Pop-Pop. At that time, her speaking skills were still developing, but that certainly didn't keep her from talking. Pop-Pop used to say she was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. She would chat up a storm, having something to say about everything with her fluent toddler gibberish, and she would use hand gestures and facial gestures and vocal inflections just like a little adult, but she was speaking a foreign language. I became so fascinated about what was on this kid's mind that I made it a point to learn to understand her, and we were able to exchange real ideas. And I found out that she was amazing. About a year and a half down the road, we all got married, as we used to refer to it. As Mom and I exchanged vows, Michelle stood at the altar with us, and after kissing the bride, the three of us did a group hug in front of all the assembled. To say Michelle was a delightful child is to sell it short. She was full of life, with abundant energy and unmatched imagination. I couldn't wait to get home from work. She would sell imaginary tickets for imaginary money to her daily one-girl variety shows. The thing about Michelle was that attendance at these shows was mandatory. No was not an option, and if you were slow in taking your seat, the little half pint would get behind you and push you there like a little bulldozer. Once seated, though, the shows were always delightful. They would usually start with her taking your food order, with imaginary French fries always being served, whether you ordered them or not. Then the main event usually included a puppet show, followed by an exotic dance number. All this from a preschooler. As the years ensued, so did Michelle's imagination and creativity. She took to writing wonderful stories and became a lover of music. Her favorite CDs streamed from her bedroom, and she began creating her own music, first singing along, then it was the school chorus, then playing the recorder, and then we were able to obtain a saxophone for her. It cost only $50, but it was a real sax, and her love affair with the instrument was born. This later led to her being on stage with it, recording in studios with the church band, and numerous other playing opportunities. I suppose a summary characterization of Michelle's childhood could be that in whatever she was doing at any given time, she always seemed to express a richness in her soul. Whether she was painting flowering vines that covered her bedroom walls, or making figurines out of the southern red clay outside, or somehow coaxing hummingbirds to light on her finger on the back porch, she always brought an aura of joy and peace. As her dad, it was such a blessing having her in my everyday life. But as the cycle of life would have it, Michelle would eventually meet a young man with whom she would establish a household and raise a family, and she indeed gave birth to three wonderful boys, raising them into decent and respectful young men. The years continued to march on, and no longer sharing a roof, I didn't really see it coming, but over time, Michelle began finding comfort in drinking. We talked by phone from time to time, often for hours at a time, and I could sense a creeping discontent, which starkly contrasted the girl I knew growing up. Her natural positivity disguised holes that were not easy to see, and I wasn't aware of her continuing decline, or maybe I wouldn't let myself see it. Her troubles continued in the wrong direction, to the point of affecting her marriage and family life, and leading to her moving out of her house, and eventually to another town. Things got worse. She was developing a sick liver, and it was starting to manifest. She began to throw up blood and required multiple endoscopic procedures. Her liver condition was acute and was becoming chronic. Then, in April of 2023, came the horror of horrors for me. My phone rang, and I was told that Michelle was in the hospital, in intensive care, and in a coma, and that I needed to get there as soon as possible. I lived 3 hours away from the hospital, and I had to tend to farm animals and prepare them for my not being there for at least a couple of days. I know I certainly wasn't going to be back home that night, and probably longer. It would be about 4 or 5 hours before I could get there. About an hour before reaching the hospital, I got another call. This time it was for a family meeting to discuss removing Michelle from life support. They were going to keep her alive until I got there. I finally made it to the hospital and found everyone in the post-ICU step-down unit. The family was gathered around the bed where Michelle lay, just this side of lifelessness and gray in color. Soon after I arrived, they transferred her to the palliative care ward, where they removed her oxygen, her feeding tube, and all other life-sustaining assistance. They estimated that she would last about an hour. The hospital chaplain visited, and we were advised to say our goodbyes to Michelle. I couldn't believe it. My little girl, who was always so full of life, who could seem to accomplish anything by sheer force of will, now lie motionless, with mouth agape in her final expression of life. But then there was a surprise turn of events.